We don't have the money for all the cameras. We had it in the funding bill, but since you guys decided not to vote for it, we don't have the money to put it on all of our officers.
Welcome, Mr. Secretary. I think from where I sit, I think it's pretty fair to say that DHS under President Trump has been a debacle. From day one, we saw rampant abuse of power and corruption, from awarding millions in no-compete contracts to companies with direct family ties to DHS officials, to blatantly politicizing disaster relief and slow-walking or outright blocking funding to blue states like mine, to making this country less prepared for disasters and leaving communities in the lurch. And then you have the absolutely shameful, unacceptable, un-American conduct we have seen from some of ICE and Border Patrol members. After Republicans gave nearly $200 billion last summer in their big ugly bill, with effectively no strings attached, President Trump and Stephen Miller built up a paramilitary force and essentially promised it immunity and set it loose on some of our American communities. We all witnessed the consequences: a family heading home from a basketball game that was tear gassed, a priest in Chicago shot in the head and body with pepper balls, an American citizen dragged out of the house in the freezing cold in his underwear, Renee Good, Alex Preddy, others murdered in broad daylight. Those actions shock the conscience and have shocked the world, which is horrified by what has unfolded on American streets. So, going back, as we negotiated the FY26 DHS funding bill, I fought very hard alongside my Democratic colleagues to secure very basic reforms to make sure nothing like that happened again. Steps like requiring body cameras and ensuring that the footage is retained and available, restoring basic training and hiring standards, requiring warrants, ending racial profiling, banning enforcement actions in sensitive locations like schools and hospitals and houses of worship, taking off the masks and requiring visible identification. Those are very basic protocols the American people overwhelmingly support, and, by the way, police departments follow every day. But unfortunately, after weeks of back and forth and at times good discussions and good progress, Republicans did ultimately walk away from the talks to enshrine those protections into law. And they chose instead to circumvent Democrats through reconciliation and are now trying to fund ICE and Border Patrol for the remainder of Trump's presidency, not just this year, without any oversight or accountability measures in place. This is exactly what led to the horrors that we did witness in Minneapolis and across the country. And I want to be very clear, Secretary Mullin. I'm watching closely to see what steps you now take as the new DHS Secretary. And I have to say, I have yet to see you take back the reins from Stephen Miller, because even now we are seeing some outrageous proposals. You plan to withdraw CBP officers from airports in cities that don't roll over for Trump. That is insane. It is not only dangerous, it would also spell economic crisis for blue and red states. Meanwhile, DHS is already on track to break last year's record for people dying in custody. And last week, ICE agents tear-gassed a United States senator who was simply working to peacefully mediate between ICE and protesters after federal law enforcement, we know, shoved a different senator to the ground last year. And you continue to deport upstanding community members instead of the worst of the worst. Accountability is desperately needed, and I know we will all keep fighting for that. So let me ask you, throughout our negotiations over the 26 bill, the White House and border czar Tom Homan told us we didn't need to put any reforms into law because DHS was already making changes like ending the roving patrols, restoring stronger training standards, requiring body cameras to be worn by all agents and officers. And I know that at your confirmation hearing, you said you do not support the warrantless search and seizure policy the administration put in place. And you reportedly were recently talking about legislation to require judicial warrants, restore training standards, and protect sensitive locations from raids. But while you and Tom Homan say you've made some of those changes, the American people haven't seen the proof of that. So I want to ask you today, what are your current training requirements for agents? Training requirements.
Thank you for the question. I want to remind the senator that I was part of the negotiating those reforms, and I think you're aware of that. So I actually know what happened
I know you were
during
not in
those.
the room, but I do know you were aware of them.
No, I was very involved in it.
But you were not
the
in
back
the room.
and forth. No, I was very involved.
I was in the room. You were not in the room. I know you were.
We was very involved in it because we were talking with the
Doesn't matter.
House.
I asked
and,
you a
and
question.
you know,
What is the training report?
Senator, you know that we agreed to all this stuff that you said. The fact is that you guys walked away because you had primary elections.
No,
we had agreed.
Mr.
You had asked for
Secretary,
3, and we asked for
walked away
9
because you would
we had
not
agreed
put
to
in
9,
writing.
and you would never get to yes. And so we walked away and did reconciliation because you was never going to get to yes between Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, and you know that to
Mr.
be a fact.
Secretary,
And you can't pull the rule over my eyes because I was part of the
you can give
negotiation.
your side. I'm telling you, I was in the
When you
room
start
and we turned away. I want to ask you.
So it was interesting. I was involved in that too.
What
so
are your
if you want to
training
start talking about
requirements?
training, we're going to July 1st. We'll go back to the 71, 72 hours of training. The training policy is going to change a little bit because we're going to be doing crowd control and fit today's needs. But all training always is willing to change back and forth. When you start talking about warrants, I was very clear in my confirmation that judicial warrants are used when we're entering a residence unless we're in pursuit of a criminal. Or the criminal continues to evade by going from one place to the next, and we're trying to lock the person down. But I was very clear when we started discussing that. And on the sensitive locations, it's been asked multiple times. We're not actively being at sensitive locations. We do sometimes have to pick up a felon that is around sensitive locations, but we're not actively patrolling those. And I think you know that to be true.
Okay, and can you give this committee in writing what your current training requirements are? You said as of July 1st. If you could give that to us so we
Yes.
can see what those are. And how about the updated departmental protocols for agents engaging with protesters?
I'm sorry?
Yeah, you have an updated department protocol for agents who are engaging with protesters. Can you describe that?
And the time has expired, so if you can get your answer quickly, I'd appreciate it.
Well, let me just ask you then, if you could give the committee in writing that answer, whether or not you've ended roving patrols and whether or not every officer and agent in the field is now wearing a body camera in writing so we can see what your protocols are.
We don't have the money for all the cameras. We had it in the funding bill, but since you guys decided not to vote for it, we don't have the money to put it on all of our officers. But if you remember, during the funding bill, we had $20 million set up for it. And it's currently unfunded because the Democrats are refusing
we had
to fund
$20 million
CBP.
in it, and I will tell you this, that was not enough. But what I'd like to know is
We'll respond
if
to you in
will
writing.
respond to that in writing, what your current policies are, so we know that they are actual policies being implemented. Thank you.
We'll take that.